real-world problems for data exploration with data study groups, which is, I think, going to be fascinating. I've often wondered what happens inside a data study group. So this session will be led by Dr. Christopher Windows-Yule, known as Kit. So Kit is the Director of Innovation at the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences at the University of Birmingham. He's also a research ethics reviewer for the Alan Turing Institute, a role which advises on the ethical implications of work performed by and through the Turing Institute, and an Innovate UK Bridge AI independent scientific advisor. So, over to you, Kit.
Thank you very much. So the goal of this session is to learn a little bit more about how we can take real-world challenges with real-world data and quickly do something about them, looking through the framework of a data study group, which is something I'll explain in a few moments' time. So with us today we have Ravi Gidoomal. If you'd like to give yourself a brief introduction.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Ravi. I lead a business called Edge Digital Manufacturing. We're a small digital manufacturing transformation consultancy. We've worked very closely with a number of initiatives such as Made Smarter to help SMEs in this country to adopt digital technologies. And as part of that, we've developed diagnostic tools which capture a lot of data. And we were privileged to work with Kit and some of the Bridge AI program over the last year to get more from our data and explore different data science techniques.
And we have Agerta Elezai.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Agerta Elezai. I'm a senior lecturer in Birmingham City University. I'm a Turing Fellow, and I'm an independent scientific advisor in the Bridge AI program under Innovate UK. I'm leading some initiatives in the application of generative AI in the construction domain recently, and I'm very happy to be here today in order to share my experience with data study groups.
Thank you, Agerta. And we have Skyler Xie.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Skyler, and I'm part of the Skills team at the Alan Turing Institute. So my background, I'm finishing my PhD, and my PhD is mainly in quantitative modeling with economic data or industrial organizational data. So some of you may join our mini data study group in the last couple of days. So that's kind of data in my work, I'm mainly dealing with. Yeah.
And last but not least, we have Lara Johnson.
So I'm Lara. I'm also in the Applied Skills team with Skyler. I'm in the final year of my PhD, which is in machine learning and health. And I have to say, I know Skyler for almost 2.5 years because we first met at a data study group 2.5 years ago, and we've been working together ever since.
I see people might wait a good ending story after we first met. Thanks.
So, as for why we're here today, the goal is to give some insights from the work that all of us have done, either leading or being the challenge owner for or facilitating data study groups, about how we can take real-world data and real-world challenges and transform them into something that data scientists can actually meaningfully work with. So that means working out how to ask the right questions of your data, how to get the right data, and how to work out how to fit this all together into something that's manageable in what in research context is an insanely short timescale. And finally, to discuss the kind of impacts that these projects can and have achieved. Before launching into the proper session, it's worth briefly explaining what a data study group is. So it's a sprint research activity that's been developed and perfected at the Alan Turing Institute, where we get a room full of extremely clever people with expertise in various areas of data science and AI. So we're sort of typically 10 to 15 people, PhD students, postdocs and similar, with diverse expertise, a very interdisciplinary skill set, and then let them really have at a problem for a solid week. So that's what a data study group is. It's rather a vague definition, so it's worth perhaps giving a few examples of past data study groups. So Ravi, would you like to talk about your experience?
Yeah, sure. And we've had the privilege over the last couple of days of running a mini data study group based on one of our challenges. So we've been capturing digital readiness data for a number of years. And we were also looking over the last year through a funded project at the interaction between digital readiness, so this is the maturity of a company in adopting new technologies, with their business performance. And we wanted to understand some of the correlations, some of the links, but also how might we better capture data and better analyze data, and perhaps even use new and different data science techniques to understand more from that data and make predictions and start to inform development of some of our programs in real life. And what the data study group's done for us is enabled lots of different thinking and people with different ideas to discuss the problem, to approach it from different perspectives, and come up with a range of ideas. And some of them have been aligned to work that Kit and myself and others have already been thinking about over the last 12 months. But others were brand new, and we were coming up with some very interesting ideas this morning, which we can then take away and start to see how we can apply that in our day-to-day work.
Thank you, Ravi. And Agatha, would you like to talk about your experience?
Yeah, so I run a mini study group under the PhD Connect of Turing in 2-3 months ago, and it was very interesting because in this study group we came with an existing project that we are running under Innovate UK with an SME on board, and the focus of the research, it was how we can use generative AI in order to estimate the cost in construction domain and to handle some of the challenges related to the cost prediction in the construction domain. And we have been based it on working with a real data set, 50 years historical data coming from the construction projects, and we have been exploring together with the audience in the study group about how we can, we tackled 3 different research questions. Let's say the first one was how we can use generative AI in the construction domain for cost prediction. The second one, it was about brainstorming about different data sources that we might add to our challenge, let's say, because we had some existing data set, but during this study group we investigated it further and we really identified some other publicly available data set that it might be used. And the third one, it was about how we can improve the generated reports obtained by the generative AI in order to present them to the stakeholders. And it was a very exciting opportunity with all the participants and the value that they bring to the running project that we have.
Thank you very much. So our first proper question today, and this is both in the context of DSGs but also more widely, what in your view are the challenges with tackling real-world data in academic settings? Lara, would you like to start us off?
That's a good question. So often I think it really relates to how you're defining a problem, and I think there's differences to doing that in academic settings versus in more of kind of an applied context. So in an academic setting, like problems, they tend to be quite specific and like they have to be more well defined. Whereas a more real-world application, it might be very messy. It might involve lots of different stakeholders. It might involve kind of more messy, less clean data. So I think the challenge of how do you define that properly is a big challenge.
Thank you.
In terms of the challenges, let's say, so I would like to add the first one, it was the problem definition. We have to define it correctly from the start, what Laura mentioned. And the second one is about the data itself, because we know that all this kind of AI adoption in the industry, in different industries, so they are heavily based on data, and we need to have data and to have access to the data. Sometimes we face many challenges with the data set. It can be that we have available data set, we can't access this kind of data set. There are also some sensitivity in this data because, at least for my example, let's say from the construction domain, the data that we are using, they belong to different clients that they work with the company and so on, and they contain confidentiality and sensitivity issue in this data, and we need to keep in mind that we need to secure during all the phases of starting from pre-processing and analysis of this data. The other one of the challenges is about transparency during all these processes that we carry out, so we need to build up system in terms of being trustable and explainable, and that is really important from the stakeholders' point of view. And finally, I would like to mention that we need to balance the industry expectations with the research engagement, because this is what is the main benefits of these study groups, because they bridge the gap between the industry and academia. The industry, when it comes to the industry, they want to have quickable and tangible benefits. When it comes to academia, we see them as research problems, and that is where these study groups help in order to bridge this gap and to make a closer collaboration between the industry and academia.
So you mentioned a bit about industry expectations, so
Yes.
perhaps Ravi, you'd like to talk us through the industry perspective on that.
Well, and I think I was going to sort of pick up on that bridging the gap, because certainly what we've experienced with our discussions is from an academic perspective, you can have a wish list this big in terms of how you'd like the data, how clean it is, the quality. You know, in a way, if you could go back, in our case, it's SMEs that we're dealing with, and if we could ask them 1,000 questions, we'd be able to discover a lot more insights. But then you're dealing with the practical aspect of how busy are people, and you know, even getting a little bit of data from a business owner can be a challenge at times, and so you're trying to manage that. And I mean, just to give you a couple of really simple examples from this week's data studies, we were talking about incentivization, and could we incentivize the business owner to be more willing to provide data? And the answer is yes, that would be amazing, but then you've got to factor that into the budget of the project, and often we're dealing with limited pots of money. And another one is, could you come up with more innovative ways of capturing data, and perhaps using audio or video, and then maybe using natural language programming to synthesize data. And so this is where actually you start to try to come up with creative ways to solve the data problem. And so, you know, in a way, I'm quite encouraged by some of the ideas emerging from the conversations.
Fantastic. So we've talked a lot about the challenges. So in your opinion, Skyler, what makes a good DSG?
I think that's a very good question. So what makes a very good DSG project? I think usually when we're scoping the challenge from this kind of industries, we mainly look at 3 dimensions. The first one is the scope of your objective, of your problem. You know, some companies maybe come to you saying, oh, we want to, you know, do some collaborations so we can increase our profit margin by 10%, or we want to increase our sales revenue by another 20%. Of course, we can do that, but before that, we might break into maybe a few steps, help you to achieve that more ambitious goal. So that's the first thing I would like to mention, is about scoping. And another one I would like to highlight is the quality of the data. And trust me, this makes a huge difference in what we can achieve from data study group. And I think a good quality of data means you know how the variables measured, and what's the definition of each variable, and even how you handle those missing values. And after seeing so many projects from industry, you know, looking at data set, and I truly believe if a company can provide a good data set, it means they truly understand the value of their data, and it also shows, you know, how committed they are to leveraging the data to make the impact within their organization. And it also signals, you know, the digital readiness. They are ready to use that data to make some impact. So that's what I would say when we're scoping the project from the industry.
Fantastic. Ravi,
Yeah, and just to pick up on that data point, I think how you describe and define data and being really, really clear on what each data point is in each variable so that there's a common understanding. And certainly I found, just speaking with different data scientists and from different disciplines, without having that clarity, then there can be an element of uncertainty, and I think that precision is possibly it's a lesson that I've been learning, which is maybe different to how I would see data from a commercial perspective, where I'm thinking more about what the outputs of that data are. And so I think, you know, really thinking about how you communicate the specificity of it is really important.
And just to mention about this, we're talking about data, and data is the new oil, let's say. So what, based on my experience with all the companies that I'm collaborating and advising in my role, is that sometimes these companies, they have the data, but the data comes in different formats. They are unstructured data, big volume, dynamic data, and this brings the main challenge in all this work with the data in order to prepare and make this data ready for further analysis. Yeah.
Please.
I just want to highlight a quick point because I had a few discussions with some of you in the last few days. I think some of you may think we are doing more consultancy work in our data study group. But what I want to emphasize here is we're doing more than just consulting. I know for some firms, when they're reaching out to consulting firms, they're mainly trying to do two things. The first one is get your problem solved or find some solutions that can be translated into your own operations. So in a data study group, we do solve your problems. So we do provide solutions, but we go even beyond further. So what I mean by that is before we solve the problem, we take a step back and we spend a huge amount of time trying to justify, is this the right problem? Is this the real problem? And is this the problem can be solved through technology or data science research? So one example, quick example is, for example, a retail company, they approached us saying, oh, we want to do some, ChatGPT to build a chatbot. But then the question I would ask is, in order to increase their customer experience, right, maybe you need to understand what's going on with their customers at first before building something like in terms of like technical tools for those customers. So trying to understand what is the right question, what is the right problem, I think is more important before providing a solution.
So I think that leads us very, very nicely on to the next question. So you've sort of mentioned how a lot of the time in industry they come to you, I want you to build me a chatbot, or I want you to increase my profit margins by 10% in this very specific area. It's a very narrow focus, whereas the whole point of a DSG is you've got this extremely broad, free-thinking, exploratory focus. So the question I have to ask is, why? Why? What are the benefits of going through this much more broad, exploratory approach rather than a much more narrow, focused approach? Lara, would you like to start us off on that?
Yes, this is a great question. So I think stepping back, you have to think that there's data study group, it has benefits for the challenge owners and it also has benefits for the participants. And so I think this broader like exploratory approach is really relevant for both of those in a different way. So yes, as we start with really focusing on, okay, what is this problem? Can we define like the problem? Is it a worthwhile problem? Is it an interesting problem? Is it a problem that's feasible? But we keep it very exploratory in terms of we don't prescribe, here's like the exact solution that we're looking for. So we're wanting to generate like innovation, we want to generate ideas. So like the benefits of that for a challenge owner might be, it might expose them to new perspectives that they haven't considered before when dealing with this problem. But there's also benefits for the participants as well. So as a PhD student, you might be focused and going very deep into your narrow kind of area of research. And these data study groups are a real opportunity to broaden yourself out, to kind of try something different, or kind of to work with people from really different backgrounds, and to encourage you really to step outside of your comfort zone. I think that's very much needed when dealing with these complex interdisciplinary problems.
Thank you very much. It'd be interesting to hear, I think, from Ogerta. You've actually run a data study group before. What's your perspective on the question? What is the breadth of knowledge? bring forward?
In terms of my experience, let's say, even if we are working with a concrete SME, that is part of the challenge itself, so the solution that we want to provide and also the contribution in the research field, let's say, it aims for a broader perspective. So we are trying to implement generative AI in the construction domain, which means that the solution that we are offering is not only fitted to the specific company or SME that we have on board, but this is something that it's broader because it can benefit to the whole industry, because this is something innovative that we are applying generative AI in the construction domain, and that's really important to keep in mind that in this data study group, so we are not tailored the solutions or the contribution just to the specific companies that they are on board on the challenge, but this is going to impact the whole industry, and that is really important, and this is our focus, and this is what makes us proud of all this kind of works.
And I think it's also worth going to, yes, indeed, to Ravi to hear the industrial perspective on this.
Yeah, and I was just going to share a couple of insights just from the mini DSGs we ran this week. So we had 8 different tables, so 8 different groups of people exploring the same question. And I think we came out with 8 different approaches and sets of ideas. And I think for me, that ranged from validating some of the ideas we've already had. So effectively, a new independent group without any knowledge of the work we've done, actually coming up with similar approaches and similar data science techniques, similar models. And that's quite reassuring and encouraging because it gives you a sense that, yes, some of the work we have been doing is going in the right direction. But then several new ideas and a couple of new tools and a couple of sort of almost innovative approaches to how you even describe the problem, which again is really useful feedback we can take back and work with. So that's from our perspective. But the other perspective, and I work a lot with leaders and do a lot of leadership development, and so it's been really fascinating watching 8 new teams form, storm, norm, etc., all within the space of an hour and a half. And it's clear some of the individuals who are participating, this isn't what they would do for their day job. So they might be much more comfortable spending time analyzing data, working by themselves, having a lot of information structured to work with. But you're sort of thrown into this new context with a brand new study that you've literally just looked at in the moment. You're having to understand it and decipher it together with colleagues, and then learn what skills each one and perspectives each one of you can bring to come up with new ideas. And I think that's a really rich collaborative experience, and it stretches some of those team-working muscles, which can then, I think, be applied to other problems in another context. So it's a great skills development exercise as well.
Thank you very much. So the next question, this is the difficult question now. So how do you manage data sharing expectations? This is an eternal challenge and particularly topical at the moment because certain companies, a lot of their value lies in IP. So when you have these kind of companies, how do you manage their expectations? I'll probably go to the Turing folks here. Skyler, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think in terms of, data sensitivity, which is a very important issue, not only for companies, but also in academia as well. I think that's what makes our data study group our unit, because we take everyone involved in our data study group as our key stakeholders. So we look after all your issues, and we also try to maximize your benefits. So I'll give you one example. So one thing I want to highlight is, of course, we do have some data sensitive issues, but we also care about what's the learning opportunity for us, as well as for the challenge owners. So I think that's why I'm saying everyone's opinion is important, and we care about all different stakeholders' view. Yeah.
Lara?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd add to that. So yeah, data is obviously a huge component to this. But going back to the exploratory nature of the DSGs, the objective of a DSG is not to say, here's an absolute ton of data, go and just describe this data as thoroughly as possible. The idea is to really test out different approaches to see is this a potential thing to explore going forward. And so kind of why is that important? Like that's important in the sense that like we need to have like enough quality data like that's relevant in order to do something. But that could be like a subset of the data. That could be data that's like maybe like aggregated like in a different way to have anonymity. That could potentially be simulated data. So kind of it's ultimately like going back to that kind of research question that you have, like what is the problem you're trying to address, and then kind of how can you explore like different approaches. So it's not about like getting too stuck into the weeds of the data. In terms of sensitivities, that is like a big thing. So yes, there can be a lot of sensitivities like around that. And so one thing is there can be different safe havens for where like data can be hosted and how that can be put in and out.
Thank you very much. Roberta, from your experience, did you have any particular troubles with data sharing and sensitivity?
In terms of the data sharing, ours was a mini study group, which was a very limited time, let's say, to run this challenge, and we didn't have the opportunity to work directly with the data itself, but we provide to the participants a sample of our data in order to get them into the context of the problem and to get and to brainstorm about different other data sources to be used, what kind of other methods to be used in order to improve the cost prediction and so on. And in terms of data sharing, these are they bring very challenges because due to the confidentiality of the data that they contains, but also, as I mentioned, sometimes the industry or the companies that they are on board on these challenges, they do not have structured data, which means that they can have data in different formats. It can be PDF, it can be Excel files, it can be images, 3D images, and so on. So, and this, a lot of time, let's say, in this kind of challenges is spent on preparation of the data, understanding the data that we have, and also to prepare the full data set that we need in order to train and evaluate and to build up this kind of predictive models.
Yeah, I just want to add a quick point like Lara said. So we have been working with sensitivity data in the data study group. For example, financial data, healthcare data, or even the data from the public sectors. But when we are working in the data study group, we are working in a virtual trusted environment. So that's kind of like a very safe environment to run your data, to run your modeling. And we do some other process as well. For example, there are synthetic data approach. So there are different ways can help you to, mitigate those risks. So that's what I want to share.
Absolutely. So my final question, and I'm going to throw this out to all of you, is what impact has participating in a DSG had either for you, for your challenge owners, or for the various data study groups that you guys have observed? Do you want to start, Ravi?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's been a few immediate impacts. So firstly, the insights and the ideas that have been generated, we can take back to our business. We can sort of build new directions of research and innovation, and that's really helpful, and that's a value add that I mean, you could probably put a price on that, but it is incredibly valuable. I think the second thing is just, and this is, you do need to participate in it as a challenge runner alongside the researchers to really pick up some of the nuances of the discussions and the way different people from different disciplines are thinking. And I think that to me is really helpful to then, when I'm structuring my own problems in my business, it gives me different lenses and different perspectives to apply. And particularly when we're thinking about data capture, data preparation, and even some of these conversations on data sharing, having those insights are really helpful for future projects. So I think there's a lot of learnings, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have been part of it.
In terms of the university, I would like to mention that this is a very great opportunity for us because we can be involved in access to real-world challenges. In this, we also include our PhD students, research assistants around the university, providing to them some opportunities in order to get experience working with real data and being part of these real-world challenges, let's say. And it helps us to strengthen, to bridge the gap between the industry and the university that is important. And one of the main benefits that I see is that it helps us also in terms of ref impact preparations that all the university has to make as part of their research platforms. And the last one that is the most important is that it allows us to drive innovation nationally and internationally in different fields.
Yeah, I think I will just share some more from this kind of participant point of view because I know there's so many PhD students sitting here. But before that, I also want to add one point to the industries because, after working with industries in our data startup group, I can also see the impact for the firms. For example, we worked with one big company last year. After DSG, after data startup group, their share price went up by 25% after our DSG. Okay, that's about financial part. But if you look at the social part, society part as well. So they are trying to set this kind of like benchmark in the industry regarding the responsible AI and ethical AI. I think that's so important in that particular industry. So that's my kind of add-on from the industry. So in regarding this kind of for our PhD participants, I think attending DSG or joining DSG is one of the most effective way of doing research in academia. Because I know, because I was a PhD student as well, so most of the time I was just working by ourselves. It's kind of a bit isolated. But in a data study group, you are truly in a very dynamic team. So you are working with all the PhDs from different fields. You are working with the experts from industry. You are working with the professor from academia. You're working all the great people in a very nice room in Turing Institute. And another thing I would like to say is you can really see the impact of your research right away. Because when you're doing research, maybe the challenger is just sitting next to you. So whenever you get some nice ideas, interesting findings, you can always talk to them to see how can they translate into real-world practice. And the last important thing I want to highlight is when you do a data study group, you are being looking after really, really well. You are being fed with breakfast, lunch, dinner, hot food, and you're going to be staying in a very nice room in central London. I remember the first time when I attended data study group, for the whole week, I didn't spend anything. That was very, very great as a PhD student. That's what I want to share. Lara, do you have any thoughts?
So from a participant point of view, I think for me the biggest benefit was the broadening and the exploratory approaches. So kind of my PhD, as I mentioned, it's very deep, it's very specific in health and machine learning. But kind of participating in a few of the data study groups, I got to go and play around with the transportation data. I got to work on the computer vision project, which was like super cool. And working like in a very large group of people as well was quite different from a PhD project, because you go and you think, okay, you have like a week to work on something. Well, how do you break it down into these different components? How are those sequenced within a group? Kind of where exactly do you slot in, like within the team? And so I think like that it was a very good complementarity to what I was doing in my PhD. So yes, I would say like what is a good impact? I would say it's the broadening out in the wider data science area.
Thank you very much. So with that, we will throw it out to the audience. We have some very, very good questions on Slido. So I'll start with one. I would love to know who's written this, because you've encapsulated it all in the question, really. Can you provide example scenarios, particularly when non-technical stakeholders may not know what to ask of the data and expect it to tell a story on its own? Would anybody like to tell us how we help those who have no idea what to do with their data? Well, to be fair, I can probably start on this. So one of the real strengths of the DSG, so I was a PI for a couple of them, so they have a special place in my heart, is it's not just the 1 week with the students and the postdocs in the room. There is a 6 to 8 month period beforehand where the challenge owner, the people with the problem, actually get to work with the PI, with the person leading the project, and with the excellent folks from the Turing, and they help them define the data. They help them dig out the diamond buried in the rough and actually form a very wishy-washy concept into something with a real ironclad purpose. So that is one of the understated benefits of the sprint research in the DSG. It's not just about the sprint. You get a few weeks of training before the sprint. Does anyone else have? Yes.
Yes, I would say that sometimes there's a couple ways that you can approach something. So one way you can go and say what's interesting, and then is it feasible? And another way is to say, is it feasible and what's interesting? And is that interesting? So in terms of like working like with the challenge owner that's like non-technical, like there's different ways you can approach it. So one way is you can ask a lot of questions to try to get a better understanding of the problem, and then you work with them to try to frame it in a more data science-y way. That's one approach. Another approach is you can say, okay, well, what's feasible to do with the data that they have available? So let's kind of dig down and understand like some more of that, and kind of use that as a starting point to see, okay, what's potentially like interesting here. So you do really have to marry up the two, and you can start at it from either end.
Fantastic. And Ravi, do you have something to say?
I mean, just to build on what Kit was saying, I think so we had the privilege of working with Kit over a 6-month period before we submitted our challenge and ran the mini DSG process. And the refining of what our data was, what our questions were, and being able to test different ways that a data scientist would approach that challenge before we wrote it down was super helpful. And if I'm allowed to do a little plug, we got some of that support through Bridge AI. So if you're in a sector that's eligible for Bridge AI, it's called this ISA support, and it's wonderful getting that one-to-one sort of coaching almost with an experienced data person.
Fantastic. So we have another a really very good question here as well that obviously comes from someone who's had rather bad experiences collaborating with industry by the sound of it. As a data scientist, what communication strategies should be adopted beyond mindset and language? Okay, so I can probably, I spend much of my life working at the interface between academia and industry. And I think one of the real basic points, one of the real issues with miscommunication are quite literal language. That especially as data scientists, we have a vast number of acronyms, but then equally industry has their own vast number of acronyms. And sometimes just trying to speak to one another in extremely simple terms, or not being afraid to say, sorry, I have no idea what that acronym means, without worrying about looking foolish in front of the other person, is extremely important. And then I think the other thing we need to learn as academics is that what's important to industry is very different to what's important to an academic. As a very fantastic business coach taught me, academics think about what, industry thinks about so what. And learning to try and think in terms of the consequences, the real impact, rather than in the scientific interest, can be very beneficial. So again, that's the academic speaking to industry. What about the industry speaking to academics?
Well, just as an anecdote, so I co-founded my business with an academic. So we had that clash / beautiful collaboration in terms of those two approaches. And I think, if I may, I think my industry approach was very much pragmatic and commercial, and what can we do and how quickly can we do it? Whereas my business partner's approach was, we need to do it right, we need to be thorough, we need to really have thought through the end-to-end. And I think working together, I think that has enabled some of our success as a business, but it's not always easy because those two approaches can, at times, conflict.
And that might be one of the reasons that we have these challenges, because we can bring together both parties, let's say, and we can also work on these misinterpretations or different expectations that both have the academia and the industry, and being together in these activities. So I think these are very good initiatives.
One thing I'd like to come in and say, I think as you said about that so what question, this is really, really fundamental. So I review like lots of reports and a lot of technical reports, and oftentimes you see data scientists go off and they'll say, oh, here's a big description of my data. I've done all this exploratory data analysis, and like look at all these plots. Oh, and I've done all these like methods, and like here's all like the findings like for things, right? And so it will just like describe this, and it will go on and on and on with all this detail. But the big question is, so what? So you've done it. So like, okay, what's the best method? And like, well, why has that worked well? But like, how do you link it back to like the problem and to those questions that you're trying to answer? And I think that is really at the crux of it. And this is one opportunity to try to practice that.
Yeah, just a quick point about this kind of communications in the data study group. Like what I said, we have multiple people joining our DSG from all different subjects, economics, data science, linguists, all different subjects, you can name it. But surprisingly, the communication went quite well all the time during our DSG. I just feel like, especially I think for maybe young generation, we learn things so quick. So if you put us in a room with all different people, we learn from each other really quick, and everyone is helping each other in a very inclusive and collaborative environment. So I would say the communication would be, I think, the most kind of like engaging part when we're doing the DSG. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so another one that cuts right to the heart of the problem. So what about a company hoping to use AI with years of data, a lot of which is unstructured, and a lot that needs to be held for 100 years? How do they start on their AI journey? Okay, again, if I've stunned everyone into silence, I can probably offer my own thoughts on this. So I think, to use a metaphor, long ago back in the day, I used to work in a gym. And this is a question about, what do you do when you want to get fit? Do you just go and sit on the machines and hope? Or do you go and ask a personal trainer for some advice? I sat on the machines and hoped for a long time and ended up with no muscle mass and a lot of injuries. And it's the same with industry. It's the same with companies who try and learn what to do from questionable websites are probably going to end up with the metaphorical lot of injuries and not much growth. So my strong advice is to reach out to those with the relevant expertise. And I don't necessarily mean consultants and folks like that who are often out of reach of SMEs. Doing something like, again, apologies for plugging the Bridge AI scheme, getting an independent scientific advisor, or doing something like these kind of sprint research activities that are within the realms of opportunity for a small company, but can give you that breadth of advice. Yes, I think my simple advice would be get the advice first, rather than trying to do it yourself before you realize, oh dear goodness me, I do need to get that advice.
It's funny, I mean, it may just be the way the question was read, but often we're thinking about the technology and we're thinking about the data, when I think my first step would be to define what is that business problem or challenge that you're trying to address, or what is the opportunities. So are there pain points? Are there particular challenges that you're trying to address in your business? And then you start to look at how could the data and how might AI be part of solving that. Because there's a lot that you could do with data and with AI, but there's a risk that you can do all of it for the sake of it. And I think it's really getting to the heart of what is that problem you're trying to solve.
I think Peel is quite right. So first of all, trying to find an advisor to get some advice. But I think the next step would be maybe just come to DSG, run this kind of like a mini DSG, a small sample with your, a little bit of data set, play around, see how it goes with, a limited amount of budget, and then we can achieve that in a very short time frame. So I think this is exactly, for those companies in that stage, right? You don't know what to do, you get loads of data, you want to do something, connect with data science and AI. I think DSG is kind of like a very good trial for you to start with.
And just building on that, I think when you think about a DSG or you think about applying for support, that process of having to structure your thinking about what it is you're trying to achieve. So I found having to actually write it down and structure in my head, well, what is it that we're trying to address? And sometimes those application questions really force you to funnel your thinking and really spend a bit of time thinking about your problem. And so that can really accelerate progress in the area.
Just one thing I'd add to that, because we've spoken so much about broadening and exploring, and I think we've touched on a really important point in funneling and defining. So I think it's about really funneling and defining, okay, what is that problem or what is that pain point, in order to then expand and explore from there.
Fantastic. So we have 1.5 minutes and about 20 questions to get through. So there's some we can knock out of the park very easily. Is there a data sharing agreement that can be made with the challenge owner for the use of the data in this process? Yes.
Yeah.
Is the data anonymized or pseudonymized? If
Yes.
you need it to be. Right, let's go for a slightly longer one. Do you feel that the small and medium enterprise are just as aware of the capabilities that they can leverage from the DSG as a large enterprise? I will ask the man with the small and medium enterprise.
So I had never heard of a DSG until engaging with Kit and with the Bridge AI program. So this has been a new discovery for me, and probably one of the things I'm quite excited about, and I've been talking with the team, is how, because I work with hundreds of SMEs, how could we take this sort of capability to that audience and that community? And clearly they don't have, taking 5 days, 10 days out of the business to do this sort of thing would, I think, be a stretch for most SMEs. So are there alternative, innovative ways of delivering this type of support to those communities?
And I think I'll end with an interesting and controversial question. Interested to hear DSGs are meant to impact a whole industry. As an SME, I want to beat my rivals. When should we do a DSG rather than pay a commercial consultant? So again, I'll briefly start on this. I think, like any interaction with academia, there will be bits we want to publish and bits we want to shout about, and there will be bits that we can keep under wraps. There will be IP that you want to keep. We did a data study group once with Rolls-Royce, and I think that should say everything you need to know about the fact that some of it can be kept IP sensitive. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say on that side of things? Okay, well, with that, we're officially out of time. Thank you very much for joining us and for some fantastic questions. And my very last sort of call to action is, anybody in the room, whether you're a PhD student who would like to interact with an interdisciplinary crowd, whether you're a company who has a challenge that consultants don't seem to be able to crack, or whether you're an academic looking for an interesting new challenge, please do speak to us and get involved with the next round of DSGs. Thank you.